Look, Rod and I didn't have a lot of money either.
No,
we
we
didn't come
started.
from money, you know.
You didn't.
No.
Like
No,
I told you,
we made our money.
there's 3 ways to get rich. Inheritance wasn't one for us.
No.
So we
I
chose
didn't,
door
marry
number 3.
I didn't marry wealthy her, and she didn't marry wealthy me. Now, I had a wealthy mindset.
That's important.
I was a businessman.
That's
I
important.
had a wealthy mindset.
Yeah,
But,
we both did.
But,
We could think very big, but there was no money in the bank.
But
So
yet
our
you're
first
here.
property, we're here. Our first property, we went to an auction. Back then, auctions were live and in person at a hotel space, and it was in this big ballroom. And Rod and I had no money. We had one American Express credit card, and not advising people to necessarily put stuff on credit cards, but we were creatively thinking of how can we get
needed
this
10
property,
grand. I was like, I'm
right?
putting this 10 grand on this card.
So that's how we got our first property.
Yeah.
I heard a story the other day of a couple. This young lady was still in high school. She was like 18 years old, and her boyfriend wanted to start buying real estate. They didn't come from money either. So they flipped furniture. They would buy furniture, fix it up, and sell it.
that, yeah.
And they stashed that money away and saved up enough to buy their first property. So my answer to that question is there are many ways to start to buy your first piece. You just have to stop,
and
think
you-
about
and you
it,
be creative.
come up with a way to make some money. Maybe you got to partner with a friend or a family member or
that's
somebody.
true.
Put your money together. Maybe you say, hey, if you have the money, I'll do
do the
all the work
management
and
and
I'll
all that,
manage the
yeah.
property or I'll fix it up because I'm handy or whatever. So you just have
You
to
do
be
percentage,
creative and
yeah.
figure it out.
And here's my response to it. I'm going to jump back to something we said earlier, which is mindset. And you have to think like what it is you want to be. And if you want to be an investor, you can. So if someone told me I don't have any money, I really want to invest, I say, okay, you can do that. But now, of course, the next question is, well, how am I going to do it? Well, look, it is a stepped process. You don't go, I have no money.
Yeah.
I want to be an investor, and tomorrow you own a house. So it's not magic.
Right.
Okay, so you still, though, the first thing we're going to say is, but you need to educate now. You're saying you want to do it, but you did say also you don't know anything. So the first thing we're going to say is, we certainly recommend you read this book.
Right.
We certainly recommend you start following some things. Look, we all go to YouTube University now, and as I had the conversation with your husband earlier, we get in there and can get stuck.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can get a lot of good stuff, including our content is on
Yeah,
YouTube.
right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
we tell a lot of
You do,
things
you
that
do.
people would charge for. We're telling you these things. All you got to do is go behind what we just said. You can look into it for yourself, and
Right.
you'll find that these things, they work. We know, we use them,
Right.
but there's a lot of opportunities to start educating. So you start educating. When do you want to get started? And if you don't have money, it doesn't mean you can't get a property. Okay,
So
look,
many ways.
we
we've
bought
had-
a house without very much money.
There you go.
See?
There
But
you
we'll still
go.
live in.
Same thing.
In this journey that we're on, and in these many stories, and I think we tell a couple of them in the little book that we have. But look, we bought property with no money from an owner where they financed the entire thing.
Yeah.
Did
Okay.
that.
We've bought properties for
Jen's like, been there, done that.
17.
Been there, done that.
Let's see.
Been there, done that.
we bought properties from the bank during the collapse for $1,700.
So far you've done owner financing. You've bought on a credit card. You
Yeah.
bought through a bank class. You
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we bought
exactly.
foreclosures. We purchased. We've driven through a neighborhood and saw a person in the yard.
Remember we bought that
and-
property
and-
from on Yahoo?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a new one.
No,
It was
Craigslist.
Craigslist. Was it
We
Craigslist?
bought a 3-unit building on Craigslist. And sight unseen, we weren't even in the area. It was an area I knew about because I grew up there.
Oh, goodness.
And we weren't there. We found it on Craigslist, contacted the guy, arranged a deal. We bought it.
Yeah.
But one of the ones that I think about that's
It was a 3-unit, right?
yeah, it was a 3-unit building. That was kind of funny was we were out driving one day, and I think we've told this story somewhere, but Jen and I were driving. We ride by a house in a great area, but it was a bad house.
An
It
ugly
was an
duckling.
ugly duckling. But it was literally walking distance to a metro in a great little city. And we drive by, we're driving, and we look over, and there's this old guy on a ladder
Oh, that one.
painting.
Oh yeah.
And I look at him and I said, what is that guy doing on the ladder? Because first of all, to me, immediately it was dangerous.
Right.
I'm thinking my father. I'm thinking this old guy. I'm like, he doesn't need to be on that ladder. And you could tell he wasn't
Steady.
super steady. We leave. And, of course, something probably, the Holy Spirit, the Lord, something says, go back. So we turn around, we go back, we pull in the yard, and I get out the car and I start talking to him.
Yeah.
We end up eating dinner with him and his wife some week later, and he had got the whole story behind the property, and ultimately we purchased that property.
Yeah.
And he financed a portion of it
Yep.
for us.
That's so cool.
did.
So, and was one of the greatest properties. We did sell it later,
Yeah.
but it was one of the greatest properties, ugly ducklings that we had. We turned it into a 3-unit, rented it. Well, matter of fact, we stayed in a portion of it for a while and rented a portion.
This was
of it.
after the collapse, too.
Yeah. So just incredible stuff like that.
You know what's super interesting, because you just said that you stayed in it for a while, and a portion of it.
Yeah.
I wish, one of the things, and we've talked to you about this before, I wish I knew when we first bought, we didn't have money and we bought a house.
Right.
Why, like, if we had known, instead of buying a house, we could have bought a duplex.
Or a 4-unit building.
Or a 4-unit
Yeah.
building.
You can buy a 4-unit
'cause
building
lenders
with
will
your
allow you to buy
FHA
up to 4 units.
and live in 1 unit and rent the other 3.
And so instead of paying, like we were paying, it wasn't much, it was in Ohio, whatever, it was $800 a month for mortgage or whatever.
That's much depending on what
But,
you have.
but instead of paying $800 a month, I could have made, I don't know how much a month.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
definitely would have
And
covered your
live
rent.
for
Yeah.
You would have covered your mortgage.
So
for
back
sure.
to your question about what's a way to get started. That's a way to get started,
Yeah.
right? Maybe
Yeah.
you can buy
Owner
that
finance
duplex.
is a way to get started.
You buy that
you know.
duplex on a regular FHA loan where you're only putting down 3%.
Right.
Sometimes you can even get 100% financing on FHA. Move into that property, rent the other 3 units out or other unit out if it's a duplex, and rinse and repeat. Do that again.
And people
You
go,
know?
well, I don't want to have neighbors that close. And you said, well, better than renting an
Well, I mean,
apartment.
here's the thing, right. If you don't want neighbors that close, then maybe real estate is just not for you. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
You gotta
at some
work a
point,
little
you know,
bit, yeah.
people want real estate to do every single thing for them. Like Rod said,
but they
we
don't
put all
ask
this
their, but they
pressure
don't
on
ask
it.
their portfolio, their 401k to do
Right,
it.
right. The 401k is just sitting there. They're like,
401k
oh,
can
it's
do
doing
what it
great.
wants.
Eventually,
Yeah.
it'll make money.
My mutual
But
fund
I
can
have
do whatever it
lawyers
wants.
I have these
adding
little
to
personalities in my head of the portfolio.
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
The
And yeah,
mutual
but
fund
real
saying,
estate
I
is-
get to do what I want. The real estate saying, you can only do what they tell you to do.
it. Right. Real estate is doing all these things. And I don't know if
It's
any
magic.
other investment that's doing all of these things, but yet it gets the hardest rap.
You
I don't
get
want
a
to
free
change
place
toilets.
to live. That's the thing. Like, I was like, well, it's free. Well, if you do it right.
Exactly. If you do it right. So we think it's exciting. We think it's fun, you know.
Tell me this, and this is probably more of a mindset question, but how does, if somebody's like, yeah, I want to invite, you just said, not everybody's ready for real estate. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not for you. And somebody's like, I really want to get into real estate, you know, but is now the right time, right? And so the question is like, how do you know if you're ready?
It's
quote
always the
unquote?
right time.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
It literally is
You know
always
what? If the
right
market
time.
collapses, it's the right time.
Yeah.
If prices are soaring and properties are like going up in value, it's the right time.
You just have to do it
If
differently.
the interest rates are super high, it's the right time.
Just have to do it
If
differently.
the interest rates are super low, it's the right time. Every one of these scenarios, we never
We've
stop
purchased
buying.
in all different types of markets.
Interest rates are 14%. We purchased.
Mm.
Okay, but you got to remember, interest rates were 14%. The cost of the house was substantially discounted. because
Talk to us about that, because people don't understand what
It's
you
the
just
numbers.
said. People
It's the
don't
numbers.
understand.
Gotta
we run the
analyze the
numbers.
deal.
Okay, so if we run a deal and we analyze the deal, remember I said to you, if you want it 250 or you want it 500, well, we have our numbers. Honestly, the interest rate could be 27%.
You wouldn't care.
If I ran the numbers
And they made sense.
and I cash flowed with what I want, and the interest rate was 27%, I would take the deal. But guess what's going to happen?
Marry the property and date the rate.
And guess what's going to happen?
We're coming back to that. Hold that thought.
If I make money at 27%, and that strategy was I'm cashing, I'm making money. Guess what happens when the rate goes down? I make more money because I refi, or I change it out, or I pay it down and I switch the note over to something else, or I do a HELOC on my house and pay it off and do cash. You know, there's a myriad of
You know, the
things.
sad thing is most people today, my age and younger, and probably older too, don't know half of what you just said because financial illiteracy.
Yeah.
yeah. It's,
Nobody's taught them. It's not their fault.
No.
Nobody's taught them.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Go back to what you said.
Well, marry the property, date the rate, right? Because you can refinance the property, you can sell it, you can do all kinds of things to change that rate. The rate is not necessarily permanent. I wouldn't do an adjustable. We don't do a lot of adjustable
We
type
have
of
done.
deals. We've
We
done them
have
in the
done.
past. I think
Yeah.
a super savvy investor that knows how to play in that space would do a lot of adjustments. But for somebody that's new, I would not do a lot of adjusting. But if the going rate at the time is 9%, and like Rod said, you run the numbers and you're still cash flowing, don't get blindsided or focus too much on, oh my God, it's 9%. And just a few years ago, it was 3 or 2. That 2 and 3% that we saw those few years ago was the lowest the rate's ever been in the history of this country. So we may not ever see 1%, 2%, 3% ever again. I think 6 is probably a comfortable, healthy market. Look, when we were buying property back when we were buying our first house, it was 17%. And it was just normal. It's just like, but real estate still moved. People still bought and sold. So don't get too thrown off by that rate, because you can change that.
It's part of the mindset where you don't understand, and we talk about financial literacy.
Yeah, exactly.
Education. If you understand the math or the equation behind any mathematical equation, whatever it is, algebra, I don't care, whatever it is, there's a right number, there's a correct answer. Well, the correct answer is, do you cash flow for the amount that you want? And if you told me I want $250 a month, and I say, do the math, you do the math, okay, I'm making $270. I'll take it. Then I say, well, the rate's 22. You'd be like, oh, I don't want it. You said you wanted $270 a month.
You're getting $270. Okay.
Now, granted, I get it. No one wants to pay absorbent rates, nor do we. We talked about an ARM for a second. We have done an ARM. We did an ARM when the rate was super low. I think we locked in at 3.1. Okay, now if I'd have done,
you're talking about variable rates.
Variable rates. I did a variable rate on a mortgage. We did a variable rate, and I got 3.1. That was the variable. That was the low. I could have locked the rate in the very beginning, but it would have been 5.5. I'm looking at everything. I'm like, no, if I can ride this for a year, 2 years, I'm gonna take 3.1. So lo and behold, took it. We rode it for about 16 months, and then it started creeping. And then about another 4 months, it creeps some more. Now, guess what? It was getting close to the 5. Called up, hey, lock my rate. I locked it at 5. That's what it would have been. I locked it at 5.5.
So you made money on the first.
There you go. But you have to be aware, and you have to know when you do it while you're doing it. And you have to know that you can lock it later.
Well, and I love the fact that you're taking the focus off of the interest rate. And I think that that's the extent of people's financial literacy sometimes. And to no fault of their own, it's like the only thing they focus on is the interest rate.
Yeah,
and what you're saying is that is one number and a myriad of numbers.
You can write off those interest payments.
Well, some of that's changing with tax law and different stuff, depending on the house. But you can. But the thing is, it's still, can you make the return that you want to make on your investment, and what's that number, and what would you like to get? Like people say, hey, I average in the stock market 10% or 12% or 13%. It's not bad. I mean, and people do that. There's some savvy investors that are in the market that they do very well consistently. But for them, that's their education. That's where they are, and they track that thing no different than what we do with real estate. And so they're in it that way. And if you wanted to get into that way, we're not going to say you couldn't do that, because there's people just doing it. But what you don't own is you don't own a tangible asset.
Right.